For many long years, the Noldorin exiles remembered the fiery end of Fëanor at the hands of the Balrogs upon the field of Dor Daidalos. The popular telling said that once he had seen the cruelty of Morgoth's armies made manifest, and once the rage that kindled his quest for vengeance was, at last, spent, his body was consumed in a blaze that left no remnant but ashes. And yet, in the far and mist-shrouded corners of the histories, a rumor persisted. It was whispered in secret. Feanor did not die. The truth was stranger than rumor. As the Balrogs closed in upon him and the fiery whips licked at his flesh, his spirit, tenacious beyond measure, was wrenched from his body by a power unknown. Something in the very essence of the flame, which had always burned within him, refused to fade. Whether it was Eru's design, or some last shard of the light of the two trees reflected in his deep cunning, Feanor's Feat, his soul, did not take the road to the halls of Mandos. Instead, it clung to the wreckage of his Hroa, his physical form, as if refusing to surrender. When his sons, Maedhros, Maglor, and the others, believed they had beheld his fiery demise, in truth, Feanor fell away into a ravine of stone where the fires abated. Here, the battered remains of his body cooled. Had any mortal stumbled upon him, they would have seen a black husk, cloaked in starlight, motionless in the gloom. For days uncounted, the remnants of his physical form teetered between death and a bare flicker of life. Then a quiet power, perhaps a remnant from Valinor that yet lingered in him, began to heal the wounds. It was no swift healing, no gentle mending that might have restored him to his old splendor in a day. Rather, it was a slow rekindling, like coals banked and forgotten, but not fully extinguished. At length, Feanor woke. His first breath was a hiss of pain, for every limb had been scorched by the Balrog's assault. Once blazing eyes, rumored to be brighter than any star, were now clouded with agony, yet with a tremendous effort he rose from the ravine. Staggering along the rocky ground, half delirious, he carried a singular determination: survival. The dream of vengeance upon Morgoth, the oath sworn upon the Silmarils, and the broken promise of reclaiming them all, seared through his mind. From that point, the annals of the Noldor forever missed a chapter, for no one realized that Feanor, the father of the greatest works of craft in Arda, yet lived, albeit hidden and struggling to regain his strength. His path would take him across the unforgiving wastes of the north, battered by winds that howled with Morgoth's malice. Eventually he would find refuge in an unlikely place, far from the knowledge of friend or foe. In the days after his miraculous survival, Feanor journeyed in shadow, avoiding all watchful eyes. Pride still lived in him, but it was tempered by the raw, undeniable fact that he could hardly hold a blade aloft, let alone challenge the powers of Morgoth. The memory of his humiliating defeat, the scattering of his sons, and the knowledge that the Silmarils remained in Morgoth's crown fueled an inner fire that was never truly quenched. In time, he stumbled across a broken fortress, once an outpost of the Noldorin host that had been abandoned after a great defeat. Its walls lay crumbled, but beneath the ruin there were vaults deep enough to conceal him. Descending into these old cellars, he found glimpses of the once grand workmanship of his people. Though cracked and overgrown with rubble, the craftsmanship spoke to him. Remember who you are. Far below the ground, among forgotten forges, Feanor set about fashioning a new refuge. With trembling hands, he refurbished the smithies. It was a slow labor. Everything had to be done quietly so as not to draw the attention of Morgoth's spies or the roving packs of orcs that stalked the land. The fallen craftsman found small stores of metal, enough to forge rudimentary tools, a battered sword, and a pair of tongs suitable for further work. In the hidden depths, he even discovered scraps of mithril, gleaned from the time when these outposts traded with the dwarves. He burned with an old, half-forgotten fervor. Day by day, his strength returned. The scarring upon his skin remained a grim testament to his near destruction. But his spirit glowed hotter. In solitary hours, he hammered steel, shaping it according to methods only he remembered. Lonely echoes of metal on anvil rang through the corridors. That sound became his new heartbeat. Yet even in seclusion, the call of the Silmarils haunted him. He had once staked the future of his sons and all his people on the vow to reclaim those jewels. He had led the Noldor across the ice of the Hellcracks, betrayed his allies, and shed innocent blood in the name of retrieving them. Now the vow weighed heavier than ever. For if he was alive, was not the vow still binding? Feanor's secret existence in those years of the First Age was indeed the strangest footnote in the history of the Eldar. Hidden from all, forging new tools from old scraps, he devised a plan. He would gather knowledge first. He would see what had become of his sons, of Morgoth's realm, and of the free peoples who still fought the Dark Lord. And only then, when strength was at last in his arms, would he strike. From travelers' whispers and from distant glimpses near the roads, Feanor learned much about what had transpired since his reported death. He heard how Fingolfin, his half-brother, had dueled Morgoth and wounded him 7 times, though Fingolfin fell in the end. That news struck Feanor with a thunderbolt of regret. For though he had always resented Fingolfin, their rivalry had once stirred him to greater heights of craft and knowledge. That his half-brother died in such noble sacrifice, while Feanor lurked in a hidden outpost, filled him with unexpected grief. He also learned of his sons. Maedhros had been captured, hung by the wrist upon the cliffs of Thangorodrim, and rescued by Fingon, losing his right hand in the process. Yet Maedhros regained his spirit and tried to unite the Noldor under a single banner. Maglor became known across Beleriand as the mightiest of singers, yet heartbreak and the burden of the oath weighed heavily upon him. Celegorm and Curufin had become embroiled in the betrayal of Nargothrond. Caranthier hoarded wealth in Thargelion but was eventually forced into war. Amrus and Amrod, twins by birth, suffered their own tragedies when the alliance of elves and men began to crumble. Feanor, in his listening, grew both proud and furious. Proud because his sons were still mighty and famed. Furious because their name had become stained with repeated betrayals. The kinslayings at Alqualonda, the attack on Doriath, and further strife that turned allies into enemies. He recognized that he had sown the seeds of destruction when he set them on a path of reckless oath-keeping. Now he beheld the bitter fruit. Still, the vow remained. He heard that one Silmaril had been recovered by Beren and Luthien from Morgoth's crown, and that it eventually found its way into the sea. Another Silmaril was set in the sky, bound within Eorendil's ship, but one remained in Morgoth's iron crown in Angband, the final gem that he had crafted in the noontide of Valinor, still defiled by Morgoth's hands. Thus, from his hidden fortress, Feanor plotted. He tested his newfound skills, forging cunning mail of dwarven steel. He wrought a sword black as obsidian, in which he tried to capture the fleeting memory of the 2 trees' mingled light. Always, the question seared his mind. Was his own cunning enough to infiltrate the stronghold of Morgoth and reclaim his last Silmaril? He would never have the strength to assault Angband directly. He must rely on stealth, subtlety, and some advantage that Morgoth would never suspect. In old days, such cunning might have seemed beneath him, but Feanor had learned humility in the face of ultimate defeat. At last, the moment came for Feanor to venture beyond the battered fortress he had called home. He disguised himself in a tattered cloak, his face hidden beneath a hood stained by soot and dust. He had spent several years, though time's measure blurred in those dark days of war, preparing for this. Down a secret tunnel in the fortress he crept, emerging into a cleft in the hillside that overlooked a wide, barren plain to the north. An inescapable gloom brooded over that land, ever the stain of Morgoth's might. In the far distance rose the peaks of Thangorodrim, standing like fangs against the thunderous skies. Feanor's heart pounded. He felt the oath stirring, demanding that he go forward. But a new thought also stayed his feet. Should he instead seek to unite with his sons or with the other elves? Perhaps, if he revealed himself, he could rally the scattered armies of the Eldar. Yet shame clung to him too. His name was a byword for arrogance. His misdeeds had sown discord among the Noldor. Could he hold his head high before the survivors who had bled and died to sustain the war against Morgoth while he was believed dead? It was in this turmoil that Feanor found unexpected counsel. An old, half-blind eagle that perched upon a crag near his hidden exit. The eagle seemed not to fear his approach, and though it could not speak, it gazed upon him with bright eyes that seemed to say, "The path is ever upward, if you have the will to climb." Drawing in a breath, Feanor set forth. He traveled under cover of darkness, often by night, passing through tangled ruins. The land was all but empty save for wandering orc patrols. More than once he hid behind slabs of broken stone to avoid detection. He had no illusions of immortality. If he was caught by Morgoth's minions, it would mean another confrontation. One he might not survive this time. At last he ventured into the region near Sirion. Here he encountered the half-ruined encampments of elven refugees. Though his heart yearned to step into the torchlight of these camps and reveal himself, he dared not. He listened from afar, gleaning the news they shared. Morgoth's might was growing daily. The forces of men were divided, and the Edain had mostly retreated or been destroyed. The sons of Feanor were rumored to be scattered, each following his own precarious path. A surge of guilt and longing overcame him. He who had once been hailed as the greatest craftsman of the Noldor was now a wanderer in rags, forced to skulk in the darkness. But he reminded himself of the vow. The vow overshadowed everything. If he succeeded in reclaiming the Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, perhaps redemption for his family was still possible. So he pressed on north, through the ashes of Dorthonion, across the lands that had once been fair. The further he went, the blacker the sky seemed to grow. Yet, in the recesses of his mind, he felt that unquenchable flame. He would not fail, not again.